They say a sword is more than steel in Japanese culture. It's a reflection of the wielder's soul. And if that's true, then Boruto Uzumaki's soul, it's been cracked, it's been chipped, and it's been tested by fate itself. Because ever since Boruto's original sword was shattered against Code, and the sword that he's been using that belongs to Sasuke was chipped again in the battle with Jura, that blade has silently been telling us something that Boruto hasn't yet mastered himself. He's mastered tons of jutsu, he's learned plenty of jutsu, yet he's never mastered himself. He's never mastered the demon inside of him. But all of that's about to change. See, the sword he's having reforged by Sumire, it isn't just being repaired, it's also being reborn. And when you look at the basis of what Sasuke's sword truly was, this is a new blade that is being forged from Sasuke Kusanagi, a divine sword that has ties to Japanese gods themselves, Susano, Amaterasu, and even the hero Yamato Takeru. It is a sword that even the current emperor of Japan has. And when you realize how these myths mirror into Boruto's journey and how his connection to Momoshiki, the inverse of Momotaro the Peach Boy, Momoshiki is the demon of the peach, it intertwines with all these divine origins, it becomes clear Boruto's next power-up, it isn't just a jutsu, it's not just a karma evolution, it's not just I got new Ōtsutsuki power, it's the birth of a new divine weapon, a heavenly sword of rebirth itself. Join me in today's newest Naruto Explained video where your OBC, your original Boruto chief, dives deep into why Boruto's sword is the next major power-up for the character and why it has to, and it had to be, Sasuke's sword that Boruto built from. Also, the chapter drops on the 20th this month, so by the time you guys are seeing this, the review should be out 1 to 2 days away since the editor has the audio, has had it since the night of the 16th, but we need time to maintain the quality that you guys have gotten for all the Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter reviews. So I thank you in advance for your patience and your support. Also, don't forget to check out my Anime Explained channel where I discuss other anime and manga besides Naruto and Boruto, and my Everything One Piece Explained channel where I do lore videos on One Piece like my new video on Ace, as well as blind react to every chapter of One Piece as a brand new reader from chapter 1 up to currently chapter 1123, with more reactions coming soon. Both will be linked in the description box for those who are curious. So let's just start right away with the broken sword symbolism. So for this, we got to go all the way back to Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 5. Boruto's sword broke against Code. It wasn't just a cool action sequence, it was a statement. In samurai tradition, a chipped or broken sword, it represents the fracture of the spirit itself. A swordsman's weapon is his soul. When it's damaged, it reflects distraction, a loss of focus, or inner turmoil. And Boruto, by that point in time, had a lot of turmoil on his soul. Boruto's sword broke because, like a samurai who hasn't reached enlightenment, he hasn't yet found a balance between his power and his heart, his power and his soul. And it makes sense. Boruto, he's a child, he's very gifted, almost too gifted. He has a tendency, like his grandfather, to master new jutsu very quickly, almost in the span of a day like Minato. Yet, unlike Minato, he's never truly had the patience to fully grasp the fundamentals, as Kishimoto told us back when he was doing interviews for Boruto's manga getting ready to roll out. Boruto's main character flaw is that he's that guy who doesn't look for the shortcuts, he just knows where they are. Instead of going through steps 1 through 10, he goes step 1, step 5, step 10, and he's able to get damn close to what the original is, but he does not have the fundamentals. This is why Sasuke's last words were so important. He said, protect Sarada, and he also said, keep learning the jutsu that I taught you. That wasn't just fatherly advice, they were also a warning. Mastery isn't about speed. True mastery is about understanding. So when Boruto's sword broke against Code and the sword he's currently using chipped against Jura, it symbolizes how even years afterwards, he's still fighting his own lack of spiritual focus. He is still building on the very lessons that Sasuke taught him. Now let's talk about the chipped blade, because in a battle, a chipped sword, it isn't just a bad omen. In a lot of stories, it's the signaling that a character is marching towards their death. They have a chance to reverse it depending on their action. A chipped blade in battle, it loses balance, it catches air, and as a result, it fails to cut cleanly. This is why a chipped blade is often discarded by samurai. One wrong swing, and the crack itself, it can deepen. The weapon, it can snap entirely. That would leave the swordsman defenseless in battle. In other words, Boruto's chipped blade represents a half-mastered will, one that's strong but unstable. Just like Boruto is strong, but he is unstable because he has a whole reservoir of power in the form of Momoshiki that he can't properly wield yet. So when he takes that sword to Sumire, asking her to fix it using a mysterious scroll, that's not just a repair job. That is also a rebirth ritual, which that is very important when you get into samurai stories, because usually when a samurai gets a sword reforged, the samurai soul is also being reforged and reborn. Just as Boruto just went and made a deal to Momoshiki, he's going under a transformation himself. There's a divine origin with Sasuke's sword that some people may not be aware of. You know that Sasuke's sword is the Kusanagi sword, and that it's called the grass cutter, but it's also a divine sword, and it's also a sword that has very strong connections to Susano. You should be familiar with that term, just given the fact that Susano is the deity that inspired the Uchiha clan's Susano Jutsu. So let's back up and start with Sasuke's sword so you can understand the true importance of why Boruto getting this sword reborn is so important. The Kusanagi sword. In Naruto, Sasuke's sword, it wasn't just a name drop, it's also a reference to one of Japan's 3 sacred treasures, the Kusanagi no Tsuguri. It's the grass-cutting sword, but it's also a sword that's referred to as a heavenly sword, a storm-causing sword. In Shinto stories, this blade was discovered by Susano, the storm god, inside the 4th tail of the 8-headed serpent Yamato no Orochi after he slayed it to save Kushina Hime. It's one of the oldest and most sacred treasures of divine power. The last time we saw it in real life was in 2019, when the Japanese emperor showed off the sword, but it was in wrappings. It's a weapon that's born from chaos, but it is also a weapon that is purified by purpose. Now, the Naruto franchise, as you longtime viewers of the channel know, it loves weaving myths and Buddhism and Shinto stories and folklores into its characters and the jutsu. Sasuke embodies Susano, especially the version of Sasuke who was overwhelmed by rage. Orochimaru represented the serpent god Orochi. There was no coincidence there. Itachi in his final fight played the role of Susano, who purifies Orochi and defeats him, as we saw when Itachi used the Tosuke blade and freed Sasuke, just like Susano ended up saving Kushina Hime, which in that example, Sasuke was Kushina Hime. And this is where it gets very poetic. Sarada, Sasuke's daughter, the very one that Boruto is sworn to protect, also mirrors Kushina Hime in a lot of the stories. Sarada borrows on multiple goddesses in Shinto, from Kushina Hime to Matarasu to Meino Uzume. Sarada is that innocent child, that innocent girl caught in a storm of divine conflict. That divine conflict obviously being omnipotence. The one that we saw most famously was how her Mangekyo Sharingan was born, as Boruto was courageously dealing with being hunted down for the death of Naruto that he didn't do, as well as her own sorrow, her own helplessness over the situation, just as Susano's sword was born from tragedy and renewal. It was a sword that he got by saving Kushina Hime, somebody who he would eventually marry. So when Boruto reforges Sasuke's sword, he's not just inheriting a weapon, he's also inheriting the role of Susano itself, which is very important. And in the Shinto stories, Susano also gives the sword to Matarasu, the sun goddess, who also goes by the name Ohirume, which just happens to be Sarada Mangekyo Sharingan power. This sword is given in order to make peace. This matters because, again, Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan is thematically tied to Matarasu, and also when you look at Sarada's name, When you break it down in Japanese, Sara means sky, Da means feel. It invokes light in heaven. Very fitting for somebody that is being caught up in a divine conflict. Symbolically, Boruto reforging Sasuke's sword, then returning it as his own divine weapon represents Susano's story repeating, but this time through Boruto and Sarada. That, my friends, is potentially the biggest payoff you can ask for, especially if you're a fan of the OG Naruto series. Whereas before with Sasuke, it was through Sasuke and Itachi. The other meaning of this sword comes down to the phrase of the heavenly sword that gathers the clouds. This is a sword that has many different names throughout history. This name in particular symbolizes that it was not just a weapon, but it was also a divine unifier, a sword that clears chaos, brings clarity, like parting storm clouds after a battle, just as Boruto may be unifying the scattered pieces of his old life as more people begin to realize omnipotence is a thing. Right before we have that battle with Kawaki. If Sumire uses the scroll that Boruto gave her to change the nature of the sword, this could symbolize the transformation from Kusanagi, the grass cutter, the storm gatherer, to Murakuma, which is the cloud gatherer. In other words, from a sword of cutting to a sword of control, a blade that doesn't just slice through enemies, but commands multiple natures itself. This evolution mirrors Boruto's elemental affinity perfectly when we look at his chakra natures. He can use wind release, he can use water release, he can use lightning release. Lightning and wind are his two strongest affinities. Wind in particular is an element of freedom, change, and purification. So if Boruto's sword is reforged and becomes a blade that can channel those natures themselves, like wind, cutting through storms, amplifying flames, and even dispersing chakra-based attacks, depending on how it's used, that will be a direct callback to the Yamato Takeru legend. Now, this legend is very important because it directly mirrors some aspects of Boruto. This is one of the greatest myths that we have in Japanese folklore, and again, Naruto and Boruto as series borrow from a lot of these stories. During an ambush, enemies, they set grass around Yamato in order to trap him in a fire, but Yamato used the Kusage sword to cut the grass, and that allowed him to control wind that pushed the flames back towards his flow, and he literally used the sword to manipulate the wind and fire as one to take out his enemy. Boruto's original strongest affinity before it got changed in the anime was wind release. Longtime viewers of the channel know that the original Vanishing Rasengan was a variation of a wind release Rasengan before the anime changed it to lightning release. That was in Kishimoto's original script, wind release. What is Boruto's strongest Rasengan variation? Rasengan Uzumaki. It manipulates planetary rotation and atmospheric force. It swirls around the user like gust of wind. This was all potential foreshadowing. So imagine Boruto infusing that same principle into his sword, creating a weapon that blends and bends the flow of wind, controlling the energy and space around it. Basically, think of a sword being able to do a version of Rasengan Uzumaki the same way that Sasuke used his sword to perform variations of Chidori. That will be a very poetic moment. That will be a moment that basically rhymes, if you will. If Sumire's reforging process incorporates that myth, the reforged Kusanagi blade could become a sword capable of channeling both chakra, elemental wind, and potentially the earth's chakra that Boruto gathers for Uzumaki, turning Boruto into a true shinobi, a balance of storm and serenity. Now, this gets even deeper when you take into account that Boruto also has Koma and Momoshiki's divine influence. We cannot rule out the possibility that this sword could have Ōtsutsuki elements placed into it. That's what makes this truly next level when it comes to a reforging. Boruto is not just a human warrior, a human shinobi. He is also the vessel for Momoshiki, the alien god whose mythic inspiration is Momotaro the Peach Boy, who also slays demons. The Ōtsutsuki clan are directly inspired by multiple folklores, but they are patterned after demons. In other words, Boruto carries within him both the slayer and the slain, the divine contradiction of power and restraint. If Boruto has finally reached an agreement with Momoshiki, as hinted in their last conversation, then channeling that godlike chakra, that Ōtsutsuki chakra, into that reforged divine blade could unlock something unprecedented. A chakra-conducted divine sword, one that amplifies both Boruto's own chakra natures as well as Momoshiki's celestial energy as an Ōtsutsuki. Remember, Sasuke's sword style, it required a constant chakra flow being put into it in order to increase the cutting. Even when it wasn't necessarily being used for lightning release, it constantly had chakra running through it. But Boruto's new sword, it could now use Ōtsutsuki chakra, merging his mortal essence and Momoshiki's godhood into a single weapon itself. This isn't just a power-up, it's a spiritual fusion. That sword is the go-between, the binding agent, if you will. A human and a god harmonizing through the very soul of a sword, because a sword is the reflection of a user's soul. This ultimately is going to lead to Boruto being the one who keeps this sword. I want you to think about Sasuke finally getting unsealed. He's going to hand back that sword to Boruto when he sees what's been done to it. The reason why is that reforged sword, it no longer belongs to the past. It represents Boruto's rebirth. In samurai lore, which Boruto and Sasuke borrow very heavily from samurai characters, when a chipped or broken sword is reforged, it signifies not just the weapon's restoration, but the purification of the wielder's soul. It's a rite of passage. The swordsman faces his inner turmoil. He purifies his heart, and his weapon, his sword, is reborn alongside him once it has finished the reforging process. Boruto reforging that blade mirrors this perfectly. He's confronting his broken focus, his past demons that he's had to overcome, his burden as Momoshiki's vessel. When that blade is now completed by Sumire, both it and Boruto will have been purified, reborn through trial and reflection. So when Sasuke sees that, he don't need a Sharingan to recognize it is the true continuation of Kusanag's divine lineage. The same way that the sacred sword of Japan has been passed down from gods to emperors across generations. Sasuke's Kusanagi blade becomes Boruto's heavenly blade, a symbol of an eternal cycle of will, mastery, and rebirth. A storm finally finding peace after the chaos that is known as omnipotence is disrupted. Boruto's new sword won't just be a weapon, it'll be the embodiment of his journey, a blade born from mistakes, reforged through growth, empowered by both divine and human will, from a broken edge of a boy to a divine weapon of a future legend. The next time Boruto draws that sword, it's not just going to cut through enemies, it might potentially start cutting through fate itself. Very fitting given that Boruto's mentor is Kashin Koji, a man who sees fate through multiple timelines. Obviously, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and clicking here on the left to check out this Naruto Explained video, which if the chapter review's up, that would be the chapter review, or click here to check out videos from other two anime channels where I talk about non-Naruto content.